Welcome to K-Drama School. I'm your host, Grace Jung, and class is now in session. Last year for me, it was mostly dedicated to this podcast. As you all know, it's almost the 1-year anniversary. Next week will be the 1-year anniversary episode, so look forward to that. And what can I say other than thank you for being part of this journey? I was very, very nervous when I set out to do this podcast. It was a deeply personal challenge for myself, and I overcame against all odds. And those odds were nothing but myself and self-doubt and fear and self-questioning and all that shit. But what have we learned? What have I learned? I learned that that's just how I go. That's just how I go about doing things. Whenever I create anything new, it just comes with all that self-doubt and self-questioning. Not always, I mean, yeah, no, actually always. I always have that, and I always somehow persevere and I overcome. And that's the only way to overcome your fears. It's just to do it, just to do the actual thing that is freaking you the fuck out. Because once you start doing it, you're just in it, and there's nothing to be afraid of because you're just part of that thing. You're in the process of being the thing that you were afraid of becoming, but you're in the fucking thing. You're just doing it. You are. So what is there to be afraid of? Nothing. Nothing. Time and time again. That's always the answer. This past year, I completed my doctoral dissertation, as you all know. I had 4 job interviews. I got on unemployment and food stamps. I started writing my second novel. That's a thing. I was going to write the K-Drama School book, but I stopped, and it is now going to be on my website, kdramaschool.com. I'm going to call it the Kdrama Notebook, and the introduction is already up there, so you guys can access that right now for free. So go to kdramaschool.com or go to kdramaschool.com/notebook. I think that's the address. If not, just go to kdramaschool.com, look for K-Drama School Notebook, and click on it, and you're going to see my introduction there. How lucky are you? You're very lucky. But thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. Thank you for writing to me. Thank you for supporting. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. I still don't have 100 subscribers on that, and honestly, it's making me feel like kind of a loser. But thank you for following me on social media. The social medias are doing somewhat better than the YouTube subscription, so that is a plus. And I am really happy to be doing this with all of you guys. So thank you. Today's drama is called The King's Affection, Yeonmo. It is a KBS drama, which is based on a webtoon written and illustrated by Lee So-young, and it stars Park Eun-bin and Rowoon. Park Eun-bin you've all seen in Hello My 20s, the JTBC drama, which has 2 seasons, and she played the very happy, peppy, friendly Song Ji-won, right? I think she was like a journalist major or something on that show, and she's on both seasons. And I loved Park Eun-bin on that drama. I think she was my favorite character. I just loved her energy. I loved her style, her wit, her movements, her gestures. She's remarkable. Park Eun-bin has a very long career that dates back to the late 1990s. She started out as a child actress, and her debut TV role was back in 1998 on an SBS drama that stars Lee Byung-hun, Shim Eun-ha, and Choi Min-soo. It's called White Nights 3.98 or Baekya, which is about Korean Air Force pilots. And Park Eun-bin was just 6 years old on that show. She played one of the characters' daughter. She was in quite a few period pieces like Empress Myeongseong, Age of Warriors, Queen Seondeok, and The Iron Empress. She was also on that show Hudjun, which was immensely popular, came out in 2013. Park Eun-bin was in some romantic Korean dramas I saw when I was growing up back in the day, like Guardian Angel, My Love Pachi, and Glass Slippers. So she was always like the young child actor on all these shows. She has a very robust career in film and television, mostly TV, and she played the lead in Do You Like Brahms, the K-drama that came out in the year 2020, opposite Kim Min-jae. Rowoon plays a role that is really fascinating. He plays the Lady King's love interest on this drama. And if you're a K-pop fan, you absolutely know who Rowoon is. He's the lead vocalist of SF9. And I was really impressed with Rowoon's acting chops on the King's affection because he really brought it. He brings charisma, he brings intensity, he brings depth. He brings a lot to such a complex character, such a devoted character to the king. This show started out a bit slow for me, and it took me a few weeks to catch up and then binge the rest. But this trope of gender crossing or gender play in Korean dramas is not at all a new thing, as we all know. For listeners of this podcast, we all know that this is a gimmick. It's a trope. And women dressing up to pass as men in historical Korean dramas is also very common. In fact, our beloved Son Ye-jin, who we all know from Crash Landing on You and Something in the Rain, she played a woman passing for a man in a historical drama called Great Ambition that aired back in 2002 with Yeowon, Jang Hyuk, and Han Jae-seok. And we've seen gender crossing, of course, in the very famous, very beloved program Coffee Prince, right, with Kong Yu. But what makes Tami on The King's Affection so unique is her character's transgender queerness, which I'll explain here. In the book Camp TV, which is written by Quinlan Miller, this term transgender queer is a theory, it's a concept that Miller defines as, I quote, as a multiplicitous switch point between trans and queer. So I think trans queerness is applicable in Tami's case because Tami doesn't identify as a trans man, but she does embody a man and performs male duties as a king. And she attracts a man with her manhood. And she attracts a woman with her manhood and womanhood. See? So Tami's queerness as a king has a multiplicitous function across genders. And when Tami marries the queen and later reveals her true identity as a woman, the queen continues to retain her love and affection and devotion for Tami, despite Tami being a woman. All this is to say that The King's Affection is a show that is a very fertile ground for reading through a queer theory lens. The King's Affection is also an incisive critique of patriarchal greed and power, and the ends that a patriarchal head will go in order to retain said power, going so far as killing his own grandchildren. The King's Affection is a historical fiction. It's not based on any real king in the Joseon dynasty or whichever dynasty this was. I believe it's the Joseon dynasty though. But the queer relationships in ancient Korea are very well documented in actual history. You can read about some of that in my article on Jump Cut. I discuss some of these queer relations that took place in the palace way back in the day, particularly between the king and his protectors, his military, his defense, basically. As with any society at any time, though, queerness was always present, even if it was hidden away or repressed. Queerness persisted and existed no matter what. I think this show honors that queer history in some way, because although it doesn't end with a queer relationship, it does end with this heteronormative ending, it does kind of gesture that this was this potentiality back in the day, that this most likely would have happened in some circumstances, right? So it's sort of this imagined projection onto past history with a queer vision. Even still, I liked Roon's character because he displayed physical and emotional affection for Tami even when he didn't know that Tami was a woman. And I think these moments can be read as positive moments for queer Korean TV history. Today's guest is Liam McEneaney. He's a veteran stand-up comic from New York. He now lives in LA, and he is such a cinephile. He is now a filmmaker, and we go real deep into movies on this podcast. All kinds of movies from all around the world, from all different eras, from all different auteurs. We go deep into literature. We go deep into music. We talk about history and politics and culture and all kinds of fun and brainy stuff. It's a blast. It's a long one. Let's talk to Liam McEneaney.
Actually, I'm extremely tired. I got 5 hours sleep last night, so I had to finish editing a project for school that was 2 months overdue. So,
Oh, fuck.
it's entirely my fault.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
you
I'm
finished
actually,
it.
yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good. That's an excellent feeling, man. To finish something and then be happy with the product. That's like, what more can you ask for?
Well, I'm pretty great, so I'm used to
Yeah.
that feeling. Everything I
Yeah.
do is wonderful, and I'm very proud of everything I've ever done. So,
Wow, you're like a really great father to yourself. You know, you're like the father that every boy deserves, but to
and
yourself.
and every young woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And every young non-gender binary.
Okay, sure. Well, in that case, you have to talk about how there's gender-neutral parenting
Oh.
and non-traditional parenting.
Oh yeah.
This
That's
is going to
true.
be a great podcast. I can
Yeah.
feel it.
It's gonna be about
Let's just go
parenting.
through every variation, thruples, and
All of it.
divorced parents who are still partners to be
Yeah, divorced
parents.
parents who get divorced and then they both transition into the opposite gender and then they get back together. Like
Has that
that.
happened?
I don't know, but I feel I'm sure it has happened somewhere in the universe, and I'm sure This American Life wants to cover that story. Like I'm pretty sure
Grace,
NPR is.
I feel like I'm listening to your Sundance lab pitch right now.
That's a pretty good lab pitch, huh?
Yeah, it is. Actually, they would take that in a heartbeat.
I think so too. I think it'll do better than The Farewell ever did. Yeah.
What's the farewell?
It's that movie that actually I think it was pitched at Sundance Labworks. Um, what's her face? Shit. Her story was in NPR's This American Life, and then that story became a film, and that
Uh-huh.
film stars Aquafina. Basically, it's about a granddaughter who has a grandmother who has terminal cancer, but that grandmother doesn't speak any English. So when she goes into the doctor's office, like the children, so this granddaughter's parents, they and uncles, they hear the doctor saying, "Yeah, this woman's gonna die." But instead of telling the grandmother that she's gonna die of terminal cancer, they just don't tell her and they just keep living life like as it is. And guess what? She never dies. Like she sticks around.
Wow, that movie sounds like a real fucking downer for most of it.
Yeah, I never watched it. I only listened to the NPR thing just because it was on. And then I was like, I already know the story. It just sounds really traumatic. I don't think I could handle it right now.
I just saw a trailer. Uh, Speaking of movies that Aquafina was almost in, but then she couldn't do it.
Uh-huh.
But Michelle Yeoh's in a new movie
Uh-huh.
with Jamie Lee Curtis
Whoa.
and fucking. It's kind of an all-star cast. It's about, so Michelle Yeoh is like an ordinary woman who
Uh-huh.
reaches, I guess, a breaking point,
Uh-huh.
and then suddenly she slips into all these different multiple universes.
Oh my God.
And it looks, dude, you got to find the trailers from A24,
Okay.
and it's directed by this team called the Daniels, because it's two dudes
Whoa.
named Dan.
Oh my God. This already sounds like wow.
Yeah, it's like I said, I just watched the trailer. It looks great.
Sounds like a millennial Gen Z fever dream. You know, it's like
And the dude
this
who played Short Round is in it
short round.
from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh shit! Wow.
I didn't know that
Okay.
guy was still acting. And he plays Michelle Yeoh's husband.
I mean, yeah, you know, we're here, aren't we here to we're in it to win it, aren't we? And that guy is in it to win it. Okay? He is clinging on. All right?
Well, that's the thing about the business, right? It's are we recording? Is this
Yeah,
okay? So,
it's happening.
uh, I remember once the first time I visited LA, I went to Whole Foods, the
Oh,
one on La Brea and Santa Monica, I think it is.
okay. Wow.
And I saw a woman from a movie
Mhm.
that I used to like when I was younger,
Yeah.
working the register. And I
Whoa.
was like, holy shit. She was like the lead, the female lead in that movie. I
What
mean, she
movie
was,
is this?
well, I don't know if I want to,
Who cares? Say it.
oh, nobody's going to listen to this. Tommy Boy. So she played like what's his name's love interest in that movie.
Wow. And she's a cashier at Whole Foods.
She was. I mean, but that's the thing, right? Like, what's his name who played Elvin on the Cosby Show was working at Trader Joe's in Newark, and it blew up all over the internet because people were just like, "Wow, look at
Yeah.
this! He used to be famous. Now look at him now."
Yeah, well, that's the thing about acting is that you just don't know. You just never fucking know.
Right.
It's like, yeah, okay, you could be in a hit movie, you could be in a hit TV show, but who's to say that that's forever? It's never forever. It's very temporal.
Yeah. I mean, that's why all this shit pays so well, right? Because like you could have a writing job and make $75,000 for 6 months work, but
Mm-hmm.
then you're out of work for 18 months and you have to live off that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's not all glitz and glamour. It's a lot of like waiting around, hoping, you know, reading tarot cards every fucking day, you know, writing manifestations in a notebook. Are you
Are you?
making the movie that you want to see?
I did. I did this short film. I'll send you a link when we're done.
Yeah,
It's 4.5 minutes. 3 minutes plus 2 minutes of credits.
let's see it. I'm interested. Yeah.
But it's like just like a goofy action thing.
Okay.
Uh, and I was just like, I love action comedies. I fucking
Like
think
what?
that oh, the Lethal
Like,
Weapon movies. Uh,
oh,
you
yeah.
know, um, I just watched actually. What did I watch? I just got a fuck. I'm watching a lot of stuff right now.
Hot Fuzz. Hot Fuzz sounds like a goofy action movie.
Hot Fuzz is great. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's I like Edgar Wright a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I went to see. I was at a festival 10 years ago, and I went to see Attack the Block just because Edgar Wright was an executive producer, and he was going to be there to give a talk back
Oh
at
wow.
the
You're a
Draft
diehard
House.
fan.
Not a diehard fan, but I was like, what a great opportunity to fucking maybe ask him a question. I didn't get to.
Ah. Ah.
But Attack the
Which
Block, I was like,
festival?
South by Southwest.
Oh yeah. Very, very nice. Yeah.
And then I also saw a movie called Hobo with a Shotgun,
Oh,
which
nice title.
yeah, which was
Love that.
it was like this guy had won the Grindhouse trailer contest.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember when Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did Grindhouse?
No, but
All right, so Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did a joint project called Grindhouse, and
okay.
they basically both made two low budget action films,
Okay.
and they released it together, and then they got friends like Eli Roth to make fake trailers for other like Grindhouse type movies,
Okay.
and they had a contest where fans could make a trailer, and the winning trailer was put into the movie.
Ah. Okay. Yes, yes, yes.
And so this dude made a trailer called Hobo with a Shotgun,
Yeah.
and it got into the Grindhouse movie, and that got him funding to make the whole film.
Is
And
this
then
guy a comic?
I don't know. I've never heard of him since then.
Okay,
Like he
I'm
just
sorry.
seems to
Keep
have
going.
disappeared. No, no, it's all right. I mean, this is pretty
Yeah,
much the end of
yeah.
the story. So I went to see it. So it's like Rutger Hauer plays a hobo who wanders
Uh
around
huh.
shooting people.
Uh huh.
And it was fucking great because it was just this like dumb, low budget Rutger Hauer movie,
Uh huh.
uh, playing at a big
Wow.
prestigious festival.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that. That's sort of what makes festivals fun, like film festivals really fun. Like, because you get to see things that you would never ever be able to see anywhere else, like short films, like
right.
trailers. These are productions that full on productions. Making any film, whether it's 3 minutes or 3 hours, it's a lot of fucking work. It kicks your ass. And being able to showcase them at a festival, it's like marvelous for everybody.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so I like action movies, Lethal Weapon, Hot Fuzz.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not a big Marvel fan,
Mm-hmm.
but I did like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I watched that last week.
Oh, I
You
didn't see that yet.
you should. You know what's interesting about action movies
Yeah,
is,
what?
and this is a movie that gets it right. There's a lot of action movies that get this wrong. Is
Uh-huh.
that um, fight scenes, right?
Yeah.
They can be gratuitous and mindless and fun to watch. But in an action
I
movie,
always skip past them. I'm just like click click click. I skip past them.
but in an action movie, like a good one where the director and the writer and the producers, like everybody knows what they're doing,
Uh-huh.
right? It should a good fight scene will accomplish two of three things. One
Okay.
is because they're kind of like if you ever watch a Jackie Chan or a Bruce Lee movie or God, what else?
Just any
But the,
martial arts films, like Hong
like
Kong films and shit like that.
yeah, but what's the one that Ang Lee did? Uh, House
Oh, Crouching Tiger?
Crouching Tiger, right?
That's
So
a really good movie. Yeah.
it's a great movie. Speaking of
Yeah.
Michelle Yeoh, uh,
Yeah.
but the fight scenes should they're like the songs in a musical, right? Where they're
Yes.
not just there. They should
Yeah.
have a purpose, and they
Mm-hmm.
should
Thank you.
either
Yes.
yeah, and it's like there's three things that a fight scene can accomplish, and they should accomplish two of them.
Yeah.
One of them is to reveal character. The
Uh-huh.
second is to advance story, and the third is to make you feel like everybody involved is in danger of getting hurt, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, like a lot of Marvel movies, don't accomplish any of that.
Yeah.
Especially the thing about like being about feeling like the characters are in danger because it's all just cartoons drawn on a computer.
Have you seen that movie The Raid?
The Raid, what's that?
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but very quickly.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
It's an Indonesian action film, and
Uh huh.
it's basically like the action and fight scenes are so well coordinated that people just watch this movie because of for that reason. It's like watching like martial arts movies from like Hong Kong and shit like that, but this is from Indonesia. Like
Okay.
it was it was like just like a very small B movie, like art house kind of indie flavor, but it was like a massive success. And then there's a production company here in Hollywood that made a sequel to that. They made Raid 2 Redemption because like it was so fucking
I
it
heard
was
of
such a
that one. Yeah.
hugely popular thing. But yeah, if you love action films, maybe The
Oh,
Raid, maybe you could add that to your roster.
I made a note of it. The other thing I've been watching lately is just new wave films from the '60s, like Italian, French, Czechoslovakian, like all these
Truffaut,
movies.
Godard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's all these movies I'd never watched when I was younger. Um,
Like the
cause
cinephile films, the classic cinephile films, the ones where the film geeks at NYU with their beanies like to talk about, smoking a cigarette outside on Broadway or whatever the fuck.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
so funny. I didn't really go to college, so I had the opposite experience where I grew up. It was like people really looked down on those movies and like
Mm-hmm.
really just like it was a
Mm-hmm.
weird lower middle class snobbery Whereas like the
Yeah.
real movies are the ones that are entertaining, that people love to watch, that make a lot of
Right.
money.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I mean, there's like neither
Yeah.
one of those kinds of movies is terrible,
I
but
agree.
it's like I feel like I've been robbed a little bit because I started watching Agnes Varda movies, and she's
Oh
fucking
yeah.
amazing.
Oh yeah. She's fucking next level. Yeah.
Like like she makes it look effortless. She does these like
Mm.
character studies that just kind of like defined a way a certain cinema was shot. I'm learning, you know.
Mm. She has an eye. She has a definite eye, and she has a feel. Like she has an extra sensory feeler for that. I think that's what makes her unique and stand out. I mean, she's like a true artist. Yeah.
She was like
Yeah.
Vagabond blew my mind.
Mm. Mm.
If you have a listener and they don't know what Vagabond is, it's this movie about just a young woman who just wanders around the French countryside, not doing much of anything and refusing
Yeah.
to do any work or anything like that. And
Like the
a
Big
lot of
Lebowski.
the like the Big Lebowski, except she dies in the end in a ditch.
Of course. Of
Right.
course.
Whereas the dude's life just literally never changes from beginning to end.
Like exactly the same. Except he loses Donnie.
He loses Donnie, but it doesn't affect him much ultimately.
He still
He's
goes in bowls. Yeah.
he still gets high and bowls
And he abides.
and he
Yeah.
talks to God and
I really love the Big Lebowski. It's like that's when people ask me like, "Oh, you have a PhD in film and media studies. What's your favorite movie?" I say The Big Lebowski, and they're like, "What?" Like
interesting.
they get thrown off. And I'm like, to me, that movie's poetry.
I agree it's a great movie, but what makes it like your favorite? Like what puts it above all the other movies you like?
I I really can't explain it. It's like when I was 19 years old, I was living in Inwood, like tip top of Manhattan, with
Uh-huh.
a roommate. She was going to NYU at the time. Her boyfriend at the time was at NYU Tisch studying filmmaking. And he actually went on to become a sound recordist for um, Chloe Zhao's film, the one that she won an Oscar for, Nomadland.
A
Um,
Nomadland, yeah.
yeah, and this poor kid,
What
he
did you
passed
think of
away.
that?
I love Nomadland. I think it's like such a beautiful and eloquent movie,
Hmm.
and she's working with non-actors, like people on the site who are speaking from their lived experience, so there's no mediated acting, mental, none of that. It's all
Right.
just so pure. But
A lot of
it's
those were
like,
people from the book that the movie was based on.
yes, yes,
So she
yes.
just cast them as themselves, which doesn't always
Yeah,
work.
it doesn't always work, but and she's not the first filmmaker to do this. I mean, Fellini did this all the time. Fucking Sean Baker, he does it all the time. The guy who did Tangerine, he
Varda?
does it all the time. Yeah, so that I love that kind of realism. I mean, that kind
Hmm.
of cinematic realism where this documentary sort of element like just sort of folds into the narrative so beautifully. Like I am so down with that. I love
Hmm.
that kind of filmmaking. Um, but anyway, Agnes had her name. Oh my God, my synchronicity. My ex roommate, her name was Agnes.
Oh,
Agnes
okay.
had she had like another friend of hers from Japan staying at like couch surfing. And this fucking guy, he's like super fucking rich, and he was couch surfing for like 2 months. This piece of shit, right?
Hmm.
But he was buying a lot of movies. Like Blockbuster was still in business, so they would have the bins like where you would sell like $5 DVDs or $10 DVDs. And Agnes brought home The Big Lebowski,
Hmm.
and she was just watching it with her friend. And I just came home from school, and I was just kind of standing watching this, and I could not stop laughing. I was like shitting
Hmm.
my pants, crying, laughing. Nobody else was laughing. Nope. I was like, how are you not laughing? I was dying. And then Agnes was like, I'm impressed that you find this movie so funny. And I'm like, how can you not find it funny? It was just like this like soul match kind of moment, right?
Right.
And I'm like 19, and I was like, do you mind if I rewatch this movie? And she's like, yeah, go ahead. I rewatched The Big Lebowski every single day for the next 30 days of that month.
Uh-huh.
And to this day, I still rewatch The Big Lebowski at least like twice a year, every single year. I just love this movie so much. I think it's comedically hilarious. I think it's cosmically hilarious. I think the way that they use the word fuck in that movie is like poetic. It's
Hmm.
poetic how well they use it. I think Jeff Bridges is astounding in that movie. I
Yeah.
think Steve Buscemi and John Goodman, they're astounding in this movie. Everybody was just so good. I don't know. For me, it's like a perfect film. It matches my soul identity in some way. I think that's what it is. I can't explain it in any other way than that.
That's interesting. I saw it when it came out in the theater. And I mean, I was a big Coen Brothers fan
Yeah.
by that point because,
Yeah.
like, I was shocked when I found out later that the Hudsucker Proxy is unpopular. Because to me,
Hmm.
that's just a great piece of filmmaking.
I haven't even heard
Um,
of that movie, honestly.
you haven't heard the Hudsucker Proxy? I'm not
No.
surprised. Nobody but me liked it. It starred Paul Newman. It was a collaboration with Sam
What?
Raimi of all people, right?
And
So
this is a Coen's film? This is a Coen Brothers movie?
this is a Cohen movie. But Raimi like wrote and produced it with them. Uh,
Oh, okay. So they didn't write
so
it.
oh, they did, but
Oh, they did write it.
yeah, they did. They wrote and directed it, but like Sam Raimi co-wrote and co-produced it with them. Uh,
Fascinating.
so it's got Bruce Campbell in it, right? So like, but it's got
Wow.
like these some great like Raimi touches that they don't have in a lot of their other movies, like the Dutch angles
Mm.
and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got Tim Robbins, and he's a young man who gets to the big city at some
Mm.
point in history when everything is Art Deco, and
Mm.
Paul Newman plays like a big. It's kind of a precursor to The Big Lebowski.
Oh
Uh,
shit.
it is another what they call magical Negro movie, because there's a total
What is that?
magical. You never heard of a magical Negro trope?
No.
Oh my God! It's. Are you sure you went to UCLA? Uh,
Yeah.
it's
I'm sure
basic.
I can I'm sure I could understand the concept if you just explain it. I'm
Oh
sure it's
yeah,
a
no, of
familiar
course.
concept. I just don't know this expression.
Oh, it's just basically all these movies that were made, especially in the '90s, were like a movie like The Legend of Bagger Vance or
Hmm.
The Green Mile, where it's like the
Mm,
black character is
okay.
there to literally magically solve every white person's problem.
Right, right,
Uh,
right.
and
Like
so,
Nicolas Cage's Family Man with Don
yes,
Cheadle. Yeah, got it. Got it.
exactly, right?
Or Morgan Freeman in Bruce Almighty.
Or any other Morgan Freeman movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Right,
Fully
right.
understood.
So it's
Okay.
like, so it's like they wouldn't do this today, but the Hudsucker Proxy does have a magical black janitor who
Uh,
stops time and saves the day at the end of the movie.
yeah.
But in every other way, it's a pure delight. Like
Right.
I won't even say anymore because there's like a big plot twist that's actually incredibly funny and delightful in that like Cohen Brothers way.
Mm.
But uh, so I went to see The Big Lebowski in the theater, and I had what was a common experience to a lot of people. It's like really weird to talk to someone who's kind of always lived in a world where everyone knows The Big Lebowski, right?
Hmm.
Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's just such an offbeat movie
It was a
that
flop in the box office. It
huge
tanked.
flop. I hated
Yeah.
it the first time I saw it
Yeah.
because it was
A lot of people, it's a
confusing.
polarizing movie. A lot of people
Yeah.
hate that movie. Yeah. Yeah.
And then my friend Chris Regan, who's today is a very great, successful comedy writer, said, "No, you got to watch it a second time." And like he's like, "Because you're gonna hate it the first time and love it the second time." And
I
then I
loved it
watched
the
it the
first
second
time.
time.
Yeah.
That's why you have a PhD in film studies. But it was like, because it's just like, it doesn't really follow a lot of the beats of a movie that you're expecting, but
Yeah.
it comes across as a movie that is gonna. And So the first time when that detective like approaches him in his car when he's just like trying to smoke weed and has that whole conversation
Yeah.
about fellow Seamus, and
Yeah.
then that guy's never in the movie again, and you're like, where
Yeah.
did that guy go? I didn't get that. I
But
didn't get any of it.
he's been following him. He's been following him like
Right.
all throughout. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I still don't
Oh yeah,
entirely
that
understand
movie.
what that scene is about, but
I
I
love that
got it the
movie.
second time, and I've seen it like 50 times already.
It's like about incompetence mostly, like it's about America having a promise and they're just failing to meet that promise time and time again with everything. When it comes to police work, when it comes to PI work, when it comes to detective work, when it comes to economics, when it comes to war, when it comes to democracy and freedom, right? I mean, talk about war in the Middle East in that movie. I mean, that's like the beginning of that movie,
Right.
right? This aggression will not stand against
Yeah.
Kuwait, right?
And it gets
I
called
mean,
back over and over.
over and over. And you have a Vietnam War veteran in that movie, John Goodman, right?
Hmm.
And he's like shell shocked, but he's also all about justice all throughout. He fought in Vietnam, but he says things like don't use the word Chinaman, Asian American, please. It's
Right.
not the preferred nomenclature. And then you have like a Korean War veteran. I mean, people forget like these wars, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, they were America's failures. Because like America thought, okay, after World War II, no more war, man. We're like living free, quaint 1950s suburban life. But it's like 1950s, Korea was being blown up, and
Hmm.
all the defense, militarism and military spending, that shit really expanded during the Korean War. That's what people don't realize. And that massive military spending defense budget,
Hmm.
that's the reason why we have Vietnam War. That's why we have war in the Middle East. Okay, like people don't understand. Like that just keeps going. So it's about America's failures and America's lies and these incompetents trying to function while holding their own ideologies. And just struggling with coming to terms with the fact that they're all incompetents in the society.
That's really interesting. And that whole like landlord thing slots into that too.
Oh my God.
It was just
Yeah.
so fucking funny, but also like,
So good. It's so good. The way he asks, he's like, dude, it's,
right.
right? It's the third or whatever. And he's like, far out. He's like, it's like, you could just slip the rent check under my door. He's like, oh, yeah, yeah, okay, okay. Even when like the dude is like, when he's buying milk and he's writing out 53 cents in a check,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. At
at
Ralph's.
Ralph's, like, so many moments like that. It's just like revealing about what America is. And this guy being a broke piece of shit, like he still loves drinking, the fucking White Russians, and he still likes smoking pot, and he still likes these simple luxuries like going bowling regularly.
Hmm.
Trying to live a free life, you know, in his
It's
circumstances, and I find that beautiful, honestly.
and it's a
Yeah.
very like very in LA movie.
Yeah,
You
man.
know, I moved to Hollywood and Western when I first moved here,
Oh,
and I lived a block from what I call Scumbag Ralph's because there's just like every
yeah.
scumbag in Hollywood goes to shoplift there.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and the first time I was there, 1 in the morning, doing some grocery shopping, I was like, "Holy shit! This is the Big Lebowski. Like this is real. Like there's just people like that in this town who fucking go to grocery shopping at 1 in the morning, half drunk and in their
Yeah.
bathrobe or whatever."
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like that grimy LA look, because and he's sort of juxtaposed against Jackie Treehorn, right? Like
Right.
this guy in fucking Malibu with like his, penthouse and all this shit, like with the naked chicks and all that. But this guy, like, he's just a money grubbing bastard, right? Like he doesn't care about anything. He just wants money. And
Right.
actually, that's one thing you could see thematically throughout every single Coen Brothers movie. And I'm pretty sure it's in this film that you mentioned, the one that I'm not familiar with too. But every single movie, it's about money. Like
Yeah.
money is the thing, the driving force. Yeah. Every
Well,
single Coen Brothers movie is essentially a critique of money and its dehumanizing and problematic factors.
the Hudsucker Proxy business is there's literally the gears of business that run the world. Like that's kind
Mm,
of like the central theme of the movie is just like
yeah,
the entire
yeah,
world literally revolves around the gears of business that inside the Hudsucker building.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and
I
it
love that.
starts with the CEO of a huge corporation just deciding one day to jump out of a window and kill himself in the middle of a board meeting.
Right. That's very Coen Brothers esque, like sudden suicide.
Oh, it
Would be
is.
something I could like. Yeah, yeah.
But I think my favorite of their movies is Raising Arizona. Still,
Oh, I love that movie. I love
it,
that movie.
that's a movie my dad just took home from the video store because we all liked John Goodman as a family because of
Yeah,
Roseanne, and
yeah,
and back back when we could laugh with Roseanne. Uh,
yeah.
so so he brought home Raising Arizona, and it was like holy shit! I didn't know movies like that were made. I didn't have my mind blown like that again until like one night I started watching Mystery Train on Cinemax, which is this great
Mm,
Jim Jarmusch movie,
love
uh,
Jim Jarmusch. Love
which
Jim
is
Jarmusch.
I do too.
I am
Um,
upset. Can I tell you something?
yeah,
I so Sarah Driver has a movie, I think in Sundance right now, about the making of Stranger Than Paradise. So
really?
Jarmusch's, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's about like the all the things that they had to go through in order to make that movie happen because they were these like NYC scallywags, like um they were the fucking 80s hipster punks of the New York
Right.
streets. Sarah Driver, her sister Martha Driver, was my professor at Pace University. And I was like a diehard Jarmusch fan since like all throughout my 20s. And Martha Driver was like, if you want, you could write a letter to Jim. Like, I have his production house address. So I wrote him like a
Uh,
typewriter typed letter that I hand signed later, and his assistant emailed me back
oh,
to
really?
be like, Jim got your letter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
But he never sent a response.
no. But a year
Rude.
later, I met Jim Jarmusch in person, and
Uh,
he was so nice. Like we
right.
got to talk a little bit, and I was just like, I'm so happy that I met him and that he was an awesome person in person too, because he was just like down and he was cool. I like Jarmusch is like up there for me. He's like one of my
Yeah.
favorite filmmakers of all time. Yeah.
I don't
But
know if
anyway, yeah, Mystery
I don't know
Train.
if
Yeah,
I'm ready
it's a
to
great
be
film.
like at an age where the
Yeah.
the hip edgy movie from my childhood now has a biopic about it making the rounds.
Really?
Because that was like
It's
such a
mostly about
that's such an
Sarah Driver, but
I
yeah,
mean it was just
yeah.
like such it was such a underground thing where if you
Yep.
knew about it you were cool and most people didn't
Mm,
know about it.
yeah.
And I don't know if I'm ready to like watch a biopic about the making of something like that. That
Did you hear
it's like
did you hear Steve Buscemi talk on Mark Maron's WTF?
no.
Okay, Steve Buscemi kind of talks about how he got to work with Jarmusch, and like that's really interesting too. I think you'd be into that.
I
Yeah.
think I did listen to that interview. That was a while ago, right?
It was maybe 2 months ago, something like that.
Oh no, then I must have listened to something else. And
I love that whole like I watched that documentary about Rocket's Red Glare. Did you ever know Rocket's Red Glare?
I apparently crossed paths with Rockets a lot, but I never talked to
Okay.
him. But
Okay.
I started stand up in the Lower East Side performance
Yeah.
open mic scene in the 90s, like the mid
Yeah.
90s, when I was when I was a child, essentially.
Was Old
Um,
Man Hustle there back in the day?
oh, this is before Old Man Hustle, dude. This is
Oh
like,
shit.
yeah, no, I mean, I
This
started
is
in,
like this is like when LES still had like Mars bar and shit and like heroin people like shooting up inside the bars and shit.
yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It was when you still like had like all the bathrooms were locked because people kept ODing in them. But it was
Yeah.
after, so it was after like when everything was really scary there. But
Ah, okay.
before like all the finance bros started buying apartments. It's like
Okay.
really cool 4 year period where all the stores still had bulletproof glass, but there were a lot of
Wow.
little black box theaters all
Yeah.
over Lower Manhattan,
Okay.
and people lived in them. It was like a in hindsight, I wish I'd understood at the time what a special experience I was going through was.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time
Yeah.
I was just like fucking, I was 19. I was living my life. It was great.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think Rockets like owned a bar or worked at a bar near there.
Okay.
This is even before Manitoba opened his bar. Like,
Wow.
like Handsome Dick ended up opening his own bar on Avenue A, and then you
Huh.
like walk past a Handsome. But I
Avenue A
saw,
and what?
I'm sorry, Avenue B, I
Oh,
think,
okay.
or maybe
I
it's
used to live
Avenue.
on Avenue A. I lived on Avenue A and 12th when I
Oh,
was
near
18.
Sidewalk,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
closed.
Yeah. And they had Milk Bar right across the street from me, which is closed.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
gone.
All gone.
Um, but yeah, I crossed paths like one night. Bikini Kill showed up to perform at this open mic, just kind of very randomly.
Wow.
It was I ended up crossing path like I hung out with Taylor Mead a few times. I didn't like him, but he's like a legendary Warhol guy.
Uh-huh.
Just all these like old beatniks and like just hearing all the gossip from the days of the beatnik era.
That's interesting. It's
Yeah,
like I guess like a rude way of saying it is like they're like the backwash of that generation. You know, the leftovers, the ones who didn't die. Yeah,
right.
the ones who have the stories in their heads and they're still crawling about, talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's like I ended up getting. I don't know if you can see it. I don't feel like getting up because I'm not wearing pants.
Yeah.
But I have an Amiri Baraka book, SOS, right there.
Oh, wow.
Because just when I was a kid, all the old beats
Yeah.
hated him. They all
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because he was not good to his wife. He
Uh,
left her and their kid and uh, started over, changed his name from Leroy Jones. And they were all really
uh,
mad at him. And so then I was at City Lights bookstore and I saw this book and I was like, well, let me see what he's about. Turns out, not a
sure.
fan. Like, just like a lot of beat poetry doesn't. I love the stories of the beats and I
Yeah.
love reading about them. And I've got Allen Ginsberg's book up there too, which is a great
Mm-hmm.
book about. But a lot of the beat stuff, like the actual poetry, is just like, well,
I know. Because that's how I feel about like Patti Smith, for instance. Like,
uh,
I like reading about her. I love her stories, but I'm not into her music at all. But I love who she influenced, like Cat Power, like
right.
PJ Harvey, you know? I could listen to Cat Power, PJ Harvey all day, every day,
Mm.
but I'm not into Patti Smith's music per se.
That's really interesting. I like Patti Smith a lot. She's not my favorite, but she's someone I had to really like. I mean, part of it was, when I grew up, it's like she had a couple of hits that got like just played out on radio.
Right,
Like
right.
one that turned out Bruce Springsteen wrote it. It's really like crazy.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
Springsteen, by the way, interesting cat. Like someone I used to kind of just write off as like just a like another just rocker whose music got played on the radio all the time, and I was like
Yeah,
sick of it for a while, and I was like not
yeah,
cool,
yeah.
just not into it. But
Uh-huh.
then I started reading about him, and I like kind of rediscovered his music because I've read. Like, I just thought he was just like another fucking Jersey meathead rocker
Mm-hmm.
guy,
Mm-hmm.
and then it turned out like you should really very interesting. He was very into disco at a time when it was not cool to be into disco,
Fascinating.
and he like kind of in the 70s was talking about how it was racist and homophobic to like the attitude that people had toward disco. Because when I
Yeah.
grew up, I grew up in an area where it was all about hard rock, right? Like
Uh-huh.
either heavy metal or classic rock, and
Uh-huh.
if you liked anything else, it was very suspect. So to
Yeah,
me, it was
yeah.
just like normal to say disco sucks, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, like you listen to disco and you're like, holy shit, there's some amazing music in this.
It's
Like the
psychedelic.
it's psychedelic, but also the horns in your average great disco song
Uh-huh.
are Like these guys not only have to play well, they have to play
Uh-huh.
to the beat, and they have to
Ah,
like
wow.
fucking really hit every note exactly.
And it's a funky beat. It's not a very typical beat.
No, and it's
Yeah.
a fast beat, at least for
Yeah.
the time. You know, like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
before there was 100 songs at 180 beats per
So
second
you
or
were
whatever.
marveling at their skill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but also just not only, but like the musicianship, and so there's just like a lot of soul in a Bee Gees song that
Uh-huh.
that like I didn't really understand when I was younger because I wasn't exposed to like really good disco music. Like the only disco music I was exposed to as a kid was on Sesame Street Fever, which,
Huh.
by the way,
I
is
don't
a
know this.
song. Oh my God, it's it's just basically these old Sesame Street songs done to a disco beat.
Uh-huh.
And but it turns out Robin Gibbs was all over that album, and like all these legit musicians were on it. So
Okay.
I loved it as a kid because it had like Rubber Ducky and Grover and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah.
an adult, I'm listening. I'm like, holy shit, this is tight. Like this is
It's a
really
major
good.
TV production. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Serious shit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
What is it? What about that band Boney M?
never heard of him.
Interesting. My friend Thomas Bucher, he's like in his 50s now. He's like pushing 60.
Uh,
He just like messaged me randomly, like like a song. It's like Boney M, my favorite band, and I was like, yeah, it's dope, man. You know. But interestingly, South Koreans know Boney M very well because there's this one Boney M song that they recycled and they made into their own song. Like these Korean comedians, like five comedians, they like redid that song into their own thing and like made Boney M super fucking popular. But Boney M, I would say, is like that sort of funk disco kind of band. I think you'd be into their music if you're into them.
I'll
I
listen
mean,
to
if
it.
you're into disco. Um, let
Well, let
me
me ask
let
you
me ask
this.
you. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead,
you ask
please.
me. It's your podcast. You ask me.
No. Go ahead. Ask me first. It's fine.
So last week, I think we were talking, or the week before, and you were
Week
telling me that
before?
you teach Asian cinema at UCLA. Is that
No, I do not teach Asian cinema. I teach my specialty and my research is Korean television. That's what I
Korean
specialize.
television? That's it.
Yeah.
So
And
like, I know nothing about Korean television.
well, you know something about Korean television because you see how popular Squid Game is today, and that's
I've
technically
never,
Korean television.
and I've watched MASH, which had Japanese actors playing Koreans.
Actually, there was one Korean on MASH, and he was a stand-up comic named Johnny Yoon, and I wrote a
Yeah,
whole paper about this fucking guy. But he was
Johnny
in
Yoon.
MASH. Yeah,
Oh,
he was
that's
in
right.
MASH.
They call me
Yeah.
Bruce,
They call me Bruce.
and they still
They
call
call
me
me Bruce.
Bruce.
And they still call me Bruce. Actually, they still call me Bruce. I think Kino Lorber distributes their DVDs.
Really?
And even though I was working at Kino at the time, like I just didn't know what the fuck I was looking at. I was like, what is this? Like, who's this guy?
Johnny
Um,
Yoon's an interesting story because that guy was on Carson like 100 times. Like
12 times.
Carson, he loved Johnny Yoon, right?
Love Johnny Yoon. And NBC gave Johnny Yoon 3 pilots because Carson loved Johnny Yoon.
Uh
And
huh.
because Fred Silverstein, who at the time was like the executive for any sitcom, right? Like he was over at CBS, ABC, and then he like NBC was like, please, like we need you. Like in the late 70s, early 80s, like NBC was like the shittiest network of all three. And Fred Silverstein got hired in order to recuperate NBC and said, Johnny Yoon, maybe you can be the first person of color to have a talk show of your own, and gave
Wow.
Johnny Yoon a variety show, like a Tonight Show, basically. Like Johnny Yoon was leading it. He was the host. He was
Was
the
that
fucking host.
before or after? God, what's it called? The one with the two women and the comedian. It ruined his career. Pink Lady and
Two women.
Jeff.
That I don't know. That
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know. But this like they gave him this variety show in a period where variety shows were on their way out. you know?
Right.
Like variety shows were back then, they were very expensive because they had
Hmm.
like line dancers, they had like all this fucking thing. And it was a very expensive production and people weren't all that interested. They were getting into like sitcoms, they were getting into action TV shows. They were getting into social issues, you know, getting down with that. And they were just like, what the fuck are we gonna watch a variety show with this like weird like Asian guy for? And it tanked. Like it didn't. I don't think it went to. And it didn't have a long life. So all of his pilots just went to shit. He even had a sitcom. He had a sitcom that was supposed to be like a All in the Family, but
Right.
so Johnny Yoon is married to a woman, a white lady, and he lives with the white lady's parents. And the
Okay.
father, his father-in-law, is like the Archie Bunker type. Like he's a bigot. He just says all this
Okay.
bigoted shit to Johnny Yoon. And you know, it's like a sitcom about that. But while they were filming that, Johnny Yoon had like a mental breakdown. He had an emotional breakdown because NBC was working him so hard, you know, 3 TV
Interesting.
shows in one fucking year, and he just felt so trapped and taken advantage of. So he just stormed out, and then his career never recovered. But after that, he made They Call Me Bruce
Right.
because he had the money to do it. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that he was doing an All in the Family type show because that's not his stand-up style at all.
I know, I know,
Like
I
like
know.
he was very much about like he had that joke about like something about rice. Like some guys have long rice, I have minute rice.
Oh yeah, yeah. The minute race thing. It had to do with sexual, like him having sex. Like
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He had another joke about rice where they were like, you know, how he was like Americans throw rice at weddings, and you know, my family goes and picks up the rice off the floor or something like that. Like it's like very like you know, it's hack humor if you think about it. It's hack.
Uh-huh.
It's like racialized. Um, it's like Uncle Tom, like kind of. It's like Ken Jeong shit. Like all of us Asian American, Korean American comics, we all collectively make fun of Ken Jeong a lot because we're just
Seriously?
like he's the yeah. Because we're like he's the guy who just drank Hollywood's fruit punch and said, "Go ahead, make fun of me for my Asian identity, make fun of me for my Asian masculinity." Have at it all you want. And that's why Ken Jeong flies around in private jets, okay? Like, it does pay to degrade yourself down to that level. But
Right.
the Korean American comics, all of us collectively, we all make fun of him. And none of us respect him.
Do you I think that's very interesting because I know that like
Yeah.
I've got a great book up here. Again, I'm not going to stand up,
Yeah.
but it's a guy named Bert Williams,
Mm-hmm.
and Bert Williams was the biggest comedian in the world. Like he was the biggest
Mm-hmm.
comedy star in the world. He was a black man.
Mm-hmm.
He and his partner,
Mm-hmm.
his comedy partner, they were the first black actors to star in a Broadway show, and they would like
Mm.
write and produce their own shows. And then he and his partner
Yeah.
had a big breakup. His partner died, and Bert was like kind of the sad man who went on his own and was like the biggest star in vaudeville ever.
Wow.
And he wore blackface for a very long time. Like, like in the 20s already, people were like, enough with the blackface. But
Uh-huh.
Bert Williams, like him and Pigmeat Markham were two guys who just like wore the blackface a lot longer than they should have.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
But
but
they had a
like
politicized purpose behind it.
no, I think like you read about Burt Williams and you get the sense that like he was this very shy guy who was afraid of a lot of people a lot, and maybe the blackface was used as a way to have a mask.
Maybe like a
But
clown thing. He was kind of a clown.
I mean, maybe, but the
Yeah.
result was like there were a lot of people who were very mad at Burt Williams, like black comics and actors who were very mad at him because he just refused, like he refused to, you know. And so
Yeah.
but what's interesting about that is, you know, yeah, after a while, people have kind of people remember him. Very few people remember him, but they've kind of
Yeah.
like come around to saying like, well, this was a guy who had to suffer a lot to kind of be a famous black man in a
Yeah.
world where like he wa- he was the biggest star on vaudeville, and he would tour these like huge great vaudeville theaters, but he wasn't allowed to stay in hotels. He wasn't allowed to use the front entrance uh,
Mm-hmm.
at the theaters where he was performing. Like he would be
Yeah.
performing in front of these segregated audiences where like
Yeah. Yeah.
all the black people were in the balconies. Uh,
Right.
and he suffered a lot. So I guess what I'm saying is like there may come a time when you see Ken Jeong as like a guy who had to put up with a lot of shit to be successful and like put himself out there as a face for Asian comedians at a time like think about the
Yeah.
90s and 2000s when he
Yeah.
broke. Who else was
Yeah.
there? You know?
Margaret Cho.
Margaret Cho?
Yeah.
Yes, Margaret Cho, who suffered a lot. Like you read
She
about what she
suffered a
went through.
lot. So much trauma there.
You read
She
about
kind
what?
of went through the same thing that Johnny Yu went through, in that like the people who were
Yes.
handling her sitcom, I mean, nobody was equipped to handle a Korean American story at all. So they were just all
No.
bullshitting, making shit up, and turning into this hallucination, a white man's imaginary hallucination of what they are projecting to be a Korean American family household. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like you could have slotted anyone into that role. I mean, it was like
yeah,
she starred in it, but you could have slotted any comedian into that role, and it would have been pretty much the same show.
yeah. I mean, there's always that sacrificial lamb in a way. There's always that martyr
Right.
figure. I mean, I don't detest Ken Jeong. I just don't respect him because, I mean, but Ken Jeong, he profited from it. He made the money
Right.
from it. I think he knows deliberately what it is that he's doing. Ken Jeong is actually somebody who performs yellowface. I mean, that's
What
what
do you
he
mean?
does. He's yellowface, as in it's like blackface, right? Like this guy Bert Williams, he's a black performer who's performing in blackface, right? Like,
Yes.
so
Yes.
whatever makes the white spectator laugh and make fun of that stereotype more, and cater to their pleasure. Ken Jeong does yellowface performance in that, he sort of talks in this orientalist stilted way sometimes in order to poke fun of Asians. And how far back does that Asian stereotype go? It goes back to the beginning of, you know, like Asian stereotypes, yellow peril, all of that shit, right? So Ken Jeong that's why we call him Uncle Tom, because he's enacting yellow face performances in his work. But it's like after the Hangover franchise, he did
Uh huh.
try to do his own thing, right? He had his own sitcom, Dr. Ken, and
Right.
he had his stand-up special, which is like a disastrous debacle of a horseshit crap. It's awful. But I I'm like down with his hustle, and it's like he knew how to game it. He was gaming the system at the expense of his Asian American identity. And I'm not saying that that is necessarily wrong. It's just something I'm not on board with, like that's not the kind of career I would ever want.
Now,
Like do I want
Grace.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go. Go. I'm sorry. I'll ask a
Yeah,
question
it's
after
like
you're done.
do I want that kind of life at the expense of this, knowing the history of where these kinds of stereotypes come from? And the answer is no. But then I look at somebody like Randall Park and I'm like, I'm down with what he's doing. I
Yeah.
like what he does. I love Ali Wong and what she's about. I loved
John
her book. Her
John
book was
Cho's great.
amazing. John Cho is so overlooked, but
Yeah.
John Cho was in a sitcom on
Yeah.
major TV network in the late 90s, early 2000s. I remember
Yeah.
seeing him. And a lot of these guys like John Cho and Ken Jeong, like dudes of that generation, all of their roles, like even Ken Jeong in like Community, all of these like Asian male roles, they like when they had lines, they would be like this weird, hysterical, like uh disruptive, dysfunctional kind of element that would cause like wreak havoc. They would be the problem element. And I find
Right.
that in some ways one way of productive thinking, because it's like, how is that going up against this other stereotype of Asians being the model minority and all fucking rigid and straight edged and intelligent and higher educated and aiming for these kinds of professional jobs, right? You got that going. But against that stereotype, how are these kinds of figures undoing that, right? So like while Ken Jeong pisses me off sometimes, if I try to compare it to that other structure, the structure that the right wing wants to use in their conservative rhetoric, then I'm like, I can see the productive work that people like Ken Jeong and John Cho were doing in sitcoms.
Now, let me ask you this. This is a serious question. I'm genuinely curious about this.
Yeah.
What if I one day said to you, hey, I've got a project.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to play like a tiger mom, like a real
Mm-hmm.
Asian tiger mom, and you'll get $175,000 for it. Like, would you feel comfortable saying no to that?
Right now, at this time, I would have to think about it.
I mean, that's the problem, right? I mean,
It
that
is. I would just have to think about it. I would have to know more about it. I would have to know more about it in terms of like, do you want me to use an accent? If the
Oh
answer is
yeah,
yes, then I would
oh
say
yeah.
no. I would say no. I would say absolutely no. No, no,
But
no,
Grace,
no.
you're the only person that can do this. 225,000.
No. No, you want me to do a fucking accent? No, I don't want to do it.
But you'd
Yeah.
be all right. 325, and you'd have to do the accent, but I'd let you work like collaborate with me on your role a little bit and write your lines. But you would definitely be playing an Asian mom who's like nagging her son to do better in school.
I don't mind nagging my son to do better in school.
Uh huh.
That I could do all day, every day. No fucking problem. That's real. But I don't want
Okay.
to do an accent.
Okay.
I would
It's
stand my
very
ground with
interesting.
that. Yeah, I know, isn't it? Isn't it? I feel conflicted as I'm saying this. That's a really good question. I love your
Yeah.
question. I feel conflicted doing that, but it's like I don't feel comfortable putting on an accent at all. I would rather you hire a Korean like fob
Uh
who
huh.
and there are plenty of them in LA who if they're speaking English like their English would just have an accent like you know, from whatever fob, proximity they are to their nation
What
and
does fob
this
mean?
oh fresh off the boat.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
but what if I said like actually? Well, I grew up in Queens around a lot of Asian families,
Yeah.
and I was like, it's just based on a character. But it's very interesting, because like I grew up in a household. My dad's family were all Irish, right?
Yeah.
But he grew up in a time when his his parents were not. It was a different time. People were not really like into the whole "what's my ethnic background" thing, and they were
Hmm.
just very much about being assimilated Americans.
Yes.
So I, I didn't really grow up with a lot of Irish pride in my house because also my
Mm-hmm.
dad's family came off the famine boats, which was like a long time
Mm.
ago, and they just
Okay.
fucking wanted to be Americans and eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like they left Ireland for a bunch of very good reasons.
Yeah.
Um, and but so as a result, I kind of was aware that there were Irish people, and I grew up around a lot of them in Queens, but they
Yeah.
were all Irish Americans. And
Yeah.
then one day I saw the St. Patrick's Day parade on Fifth Avenue, and I was like, "What the fuck am I looking at?" Because it's
Yeah.
like a lot of people who are not Irish feeling very,
Oh.
very comfortable
Yeah.
throwing around a lot of anti-Irish sentiment and stereotypes.
Yeah.
And people in this country
And
are
getting wasted, which is another
getting,
Irish stereotype.
which by the way, I've been to Dublin. It's a thing, but I I've been wasted in Dublin. It's actually not fun. It's
Yeah.
because it's a lot of like a lot of those European countries are very dark a lot of the year and cold, and
Yeah.
everyone's just fucking depressed and angry all the time,
Yeah.
and they just
They
drink like crazy to deal with it,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
it's like that's why they're the stereotypes about the Irish drinking and fighting because they do, but also like the British do it and the Scottish and just fucking that whole British
When I heard what people in London do after work, I was shocked. Like my friend says she lived in London for like 7 years and worked there, lived there. She said after work, they would just go to a pub and just start drinking. No
right.
dinner, just fucking getting smashed. And then
Right.
they would just like go to a shop and get like a Kit Kat bar and then go to sleep and go to work again. I'm like, what the fuck? Like that was just so shocking and worrisome to me. But she said that's the culture in London. That's how they go down.
Oh yeah, the reason the pubs close at midnight is because if they were open till 2, they would die. I mean, that's just like,
Um, I don't drink anymore, and I'm so happy I don't. And Koreans drink a lot too. This is something I'm
mhm.
kind of thinking about lately. Like, drinking culture is it's such an integral part of the Korean social fabric. Like, I went to Korea, the last time I was in Korea was late 2018, early 2019. I was there conducting field work for my dissertation, and I was hanging out with a lot of stand-up comedians in Korea.
Okay.
And like that, it's just a bonding ritual. You go out while you're eating. Koreans always eat as they drink. They never just drink only. They gotta eat, and that's why they could drink for so fucking long. It's because they're like, their stomach is nice and sturdy because they ate a meal. So
Right.
they just drink like motherfuckers, motherfuckers. They'll drink when they're sad. They'll drink when they're happy. They'll drink when they're bored. They'll drink to work, bond at work. Oh my God. They'll drink to decompress. They'll drink at funerals. They'll drink at, they'll drink all the time. And I'm looking at that culture through television right now, and I'm looking at like companies like Jinno and Height, which are the soju and beer producers in Korea, and their sponsorship in these kinds of TV shows and movies, and how prevalent it is. Like in every single episode of a show, you're gonna see drinking. Every single one. There's like not a single episode where somebody's not gonna have a drink. They're always gonna have soju. They're always gonna have a beer. And the reason it could be any fucking reason, it would still be normal and applicable. And I'm just like, this is why so many women get sexually assaulted in the workplace. It's because drinking is part of the whole deal. It's like, what makes you think it's okay to get shit-faced as part of the job and not expect men to get sexually aggressive? It's gonna fucking happen. And when is that gonna end? It's like these shows are critiquing that kind of culture and critiquing the patriarchy and the drunken aggressiveness, but at the same time, they're constantly pushing and advertising drinking in their shows for any fucking occasion. And I'm just looking at that tension there. And I'm like, why isn't anybody calling this out? It's weird. In any
Now
case, yeah, Koreans drink
what's
just as much as the Irish.
I want to know what Korean stand-up comedy's like.
Oh, right now, you know what? You could actually see them. They're on Netflix right now. And this is what's happening in Korea. This was my whole dissertation. So
Uh-huh.
comedians in Korea, the way that they would get their jobs is they would have to go through the star hiring process, which is through the TV networks. So it could be one of the big three. It was SBS, KBS, and NBC. So they would just go. It's like an open audition, open call audition, and anybody can literally go and just like audition, like perform. And it's usually like cheesy ass gags, like sketch stuff, like gimmicky shit with like props and makeup and hair and like, very like slapsticky, and it's like very old school, old timey shit, and actually very vaudevillian if you think about it. And
Mhm.
they had all these sketch variety shows that were very popular. They were all family oriented, really tame, mild stuff. And then so they would go through the star recruiting process and then pick maybe like 7 to 10 out of the hundreds, if not thousands, who applied, and then they would make it, right? Make the cut. And then what they have to fucking do is hope that they will end up getting some airtime. Because a lot of them would not get airtime because they just got hired. Instead, they would end up doing all this like bullshit grunt work for the seniors who are more
Mhm.
established. They would go and get coffee for them. They would go and get their lunch. They would go and run their personal errands. They would go and, like kiss ass to the one writer and the one director for the entire show. It's nothing like SNL where you have writers and, it's
Right.
like so fucking hierarchical, rigid, militant. Um, They would practice corporal punishment on their juniors, like, just because everybody in Korea, all the men went to military and they think that that's like the way to do things. And it's just like punishing, right? And then last year, the longest ever sketch variety show that was in Korea, it ended after something like 30, 40 years. They ended it because nobody's fucking watching these shows. So the comedians, they don't have the star recruiting system anymore because the networks are no longer producing these shows, so they don't have a need for these comedians. So the comedians who are trying to become comedians make it. They don't know what the fuck to do. Those are doing stand-up comedy right now.
Okay.
And then the ones who are more established, who already have star status because they were on television for like 2, 3, 4 decades, they're getting stand-up specials via Netflix. And three of them
Okay.
did get it on, and they're on Netflix right now. And they're terrible.
Right.
They're terrible because they're not stand-up comedians. They're sketch comics, right? It's a whole completely different fucking beast. In fact, one of them, Nare Park, she was actually supposed to be in the Netflix Comedy Festival last year. She was supposed to perform at the Wiltern, and then
Uh-huh.
they canceled it because of COVID. In her Netflix special, you can see her reading her lines from monitors on the stage, man. Like she's fucking reading her jokes. Bro, I was like, are you shitting me? Are you fucking shitting me? But that just shows you, that
Right.
exposes how they're just utterly unprepared for stand-up specials from
Right.
Netflix, but Korea's getting them because Korea and Netflix they're in this fucking love fest right now, you know? They're down to do whatever they fucking want. And the ones who get to do them are the ones who have star power right now. But you
Right.
have these genuine stand-up comics who are coming up, people who got ditched from the star recruiting system, who never even made their big break on television because their shows got canceled. Those guys, and then you have other locals who've just been doing stand-up comedy like on their own through little open mics here and there. And they just have no media ecosystem to support their dream. So they're relying on things like YouTube, they're relying on things like TikTok, they're relying on live performances. They're just doing their own thing. So it's a fertile ground for new stuff and innovative stuff, but it's also like I just don't see the light right now as of now. You know, it's kind of sad. It's a bummer, but yeah, I've been talking for too long.
No, no, it's
That's
all
the
right.
stand-up scene.
It's
Yeah.
that's very interesting to me. Um,
Yeah.
it's it was a real eye opener. I performed. I mean, I haven't been in Europe in a while, but I used to perform in Europe, and
What
boy,
country specifically?
Ireland, England,
Hmm.
Scotland, but also like
Okay.
Sweden, Germany.
Did you ever go
Um,
to Berlin?
I love Berlin. It's my
I
favorite.
love Berlin, man.
I
Berlin's the
came I
best.
came really close to moving there for a while,
Me
and I wish
too.
I had.
Ah, me too. I love
I,
Berlin.
Not
Their
too late,
comedy
man. I
scene's
might.
fucking poppin'. Their comedy
Now it
scene is
is,
like, it
dude.
is full on.
When I first started going there, there was the Kookaburra Comedy Club, which I would perform at every time I went there,
It's
which was
still there, but now it's
great.
owned by different guys. Yeah, yeah.
Is it? That's too bad. I loved the
No,
owners.
no, it's a good like so Cosmic Comedy. Do you know Cosmic Comedy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So those guys took over Kookaburra.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
the
so
the
it's in
people
good
that,
hands.
it used to be like this great family run, basically a family run comedy club, and like
Yeah.
it was really interesting because the couple that owned it had their own sitcom. It was like a white lady and
Wow.
an Indian guy,
Yeah.
and they had a
Yeah.
sitcom about their lives. And I think they used that money to open the club and or whatever. But
Oh, fascinating.
I
Yeah.
think that's the story. But this woman used to just run an English. I mean, this is how podunk Berlin comedy used to be. This woman,
Mm.
Kim Eustace, was this Australian woman
Uh-huh.
who moved to Berlin and just
Mm.
ran a comedy variety night once a month called English English Comedy Night. I think it was. I still have the mug
Uh-huh.
somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I would just go there, pay all right, and I would just spend a week in Berlin, like just kind of hanging out and
Yeah.
fucking. I understand it's very very different there now. But at the time it
Their
was like,
English stand-up comedy scene is like it's pretty great. Like whenever I go to Berlin, I'll just go for 3 months and I'll just like use it like boot camp. I get stage time every fucking night. There's always
Right.
a fucking audience. I just do my thing. I'll write 45 minutes of new stuff every time I go. Of course, like once I bring it back to the States, maybe like 10, 15 is only good, but I write like a motherfucker when I'm in Berlin.
And it's just such a
And
great vibe. I mean, Berlin has
oh
always
my
reminded
God,
me
it's
of
so
like
good.
the East Village when I was going there in the 90s. Like that's just kind
Yeah.
of like what
Yeah.
but in fact, if I don't get into these film classes I'm applying to, I think I'm going to just go there for 6 months and just kind of sublet my apartment and
Do
like
it.
do exactly what you're
Bro,
talking about.
it is so
Um,
fun. I love going every fucking year, and this year in 2022 in the summer, I really want to go if I can.
Me
Just put all my
too.
shit up in storage and just fucking just
We'll go be
go. I
roommates.
love Berlin. Yeah,
I'm serious,
man, I
Grace. I would
love
do that.
Berlin.
We could get like a nice apartment if we pool our money. We don't have to live in a fucking shithole.
Well, whenever I went to Berlin, I never lived in a shithole. It would just be expensive because like as
Yeah.
foreigners, like Airbnb and all like, they just jack up the fucking prices.
Yeah, hell
But
yeah,
I would still
especially
be
during the
paying
summer.
less. I would be paying less than what I would pay when I'm in LA for sure. So it wouldn't be too big of a jump, but still like fucking I love Berlin, and the reason why I didn't stay in Berlin though, and I came back to LA is because there's a limit to how high you can get in Germany as a comic because you gotta speak German. Like
Right.
English stand-up comedy scene is such a small niche pocket, and economically it doesn't make sense. If you want to get on television and get a show and all that, you gotta know German. You gotta be fluent in German. The other reason why I was like, I'm not gonna stay in Berlin is because yeah, I'm like one of the better comics when I'm in Berlin, but like I want to be in LA or New York with the rigor, you know? Get really fucking good. And it was clear to me that LA and New York have the best stand-ups. Berlin doesn't have it, Seoul doesn't have it, Barcelona doesn't have it, Amsterdam doesn't have it. Nowhere in the fucking world do they have the best stand-up comedians who perform in English, which is the best language for stand-up comedy. They don't have it. It's in LA or it's in New York, and that was fucking clear to me. So I was like, nah,
You
I
think
gotta go
LA has the
back.
best comedy scene?
Well, I mean, it
I
has
feel
comedians I
really
really
I feel really bad for
respect.
anyone who starts in LA because this is a
Yeah? Why
shitty
is
town
that?
to start in. It's a shitty town to start in.
I think it's a
And
shitty town to start in if you just stay here. I think it's okay if you like go on the road or if you go to festivals and you travel internationally, then I think it's doable, but
I feel the opposite.
I didn't start comedy in New York. I started in Los Angeles. So,
I don't
um
see a lot of rigor in comics here. I see a lot of
personalities.
I'll say this, and I'm probably saying too much for something that's being recorded and potentially listened to. I'm trying
It's
to
just
find
your
a
opinion.
very
Who cares?
this is a very political way of saying this. When I
Okay.
first hit LA 5 years ago, I
Yeah.
would see comics where I would say, "Boy, that person for someone who's new, they're really good. And if you give them 5 or 7 years, they'll develop into something really worth watching." And then
Okay.
you talk to them and find out they've been doing it for 10 or 15 or 20 years.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you're like, "Oh, that person is bad." But they're just good enough to perform on each other's like their friends' shows and do these like open mics, and then 5 years later they're still doing the same fucking 3 minutes at open mics that they've always been doing. And you're like, "Oh, this is bad," and this is a town that's filled with 1,500 of them, and
Yeah.
it's a little frustrating because you're competing for all the same opportunities with 1,500
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's like I think I've gotten worse as a comedian since I moved here. I've gotten better at everything else,
Yeah.
actually. So I'm not like
Yeah.
upset that I moved here, but just
Yeah.
strictly as a stand-up comic, I've gotten
Yeah.
lazier and I've just kind of written less. It's
Yeah.
like just it's a great place to find yourself as an all-around. And actually, this is something I really needed. Is I've gotten the discipline as a
Yeah.
writer that I lacked in New York. Because I
Uh,
was like very disciplined as a stand-up comedy writer.
yeah.
But there's just no real incentive to learn how to write screenplays or fucking pilots unless your plan is to move to LA eventually and work on them.
Right.
Which for a long time it wasn't for me. Like for a long time I was just kind of doing well in stand up and
Why
like
did you move to LA then?
because I want to be a writer and I want to make money. I mean that's where the real money is. There's no money in stand up
Got it.
comedy unless you're
Got it.
like extremely lucky, which I am lucky. I've had a good career. I've had a better career
Yeah.
than most and I can't complain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't have that thing. At the end of the day, I don't have that thing that makes TV executives excited, and I don't have that thing that like pops as a performer. And I understand that. Like, I'm not like a guy who I'm a guy who people enjoy watching, and I do well on stage. But I'm
Uh-huh.
not a guy that like has that next level thing where people are like, "Oh my god, this guy's like we have like I just can't stop watching this guy." Like Patton Oswalt's a guy you could watch for 2 hours, right? And I have a very, very hard limit at an hour. Like just
Mm.
like at an hour, my audiences are done. Like
Hmm.
even if I'm having a great time and I want to keep rolling, at an hour, I can feel the energy and interest drop off. You know,
Mm.
I recorded my last album at the Bell House in Brooklyn, and I went
Mm-hmm.
for about an hour 20. And I would say
Mm-hmm.
the last 10 minutes of that, the audience was just like, kind of like, all right, we're enjoying this, but it's
Checked
time to
out.
go. Not checked
Uh.
out, but it's just like you could
Huh.
feel the energy starting to go.
Taking a dip. Okay.
Right. And it's like someone like
Yeah.
Chappelle could go for 4 or 6 hours and like
Right.
people will stick with him. But I'm just not
Right.
that guy. So,
Right.
I'm like, okay, well, then I got to pivot. I have a lot of other strengths, as a writer and whatever. And
Yeah.
I've had some success as a writer before I moved here. And so I was like, all right, man, you know, why am I
Yeah.
going to spend the rest of my life and my career beating my head against a wall when it's not working?
Yeah.
So why not find something that also works for me and I can
Got
keep
it.
doing the stand up while I pursue all this other stuff.
Yeah. I love stand up though. It's like my first and
Yeah, me
favorite
too.
love. It's
Dude,
like
I've been doing it for
yeah.
25 years. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I don't do it cuz I hate it. But but LA
Yeah.
makes it really challenging to love it in my experience.
I think that's why it depends on the person, I think. Because I know about the people you speak of, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, I see them too. And you also have like these fucking, fucking clown, not the respectful actual clown acts, but like literal
Right.
fucking piece of shit bullshit clowns who they got no material and they just want to pass with their fucking personalities and their fucking TikTok videos and it's just a load of bullshit, it's a load of crap. But it's like for me, I always make an effort to write something new every day if not every week. Like I stay on top of that and I go to mics regularly. This week I can't because my car is at the shop. But it's like I just it's I have the inner rigor and I have the inner authority, the inner
Your
discipline.
car's in the shop?
Yeah, my
Holy
transmission
shit.
failed.
Dude, I
Yeah.
know where you live. That is
I know, it's a
you are alone.
lonely. I am perched up here,
I'll
up in
tell you
the
what, Grace.
castle. I'm a Rapunzel
I am
and
slammed with
please,
work,
yeah.
but at the end of the week, if you need a ride to a mic or something like Friday, just hit
Yeah.
me up and I'll. Holy
Thank you.
shit! I'll take the
Yeah,
20-minute
man.
drive to where you live, and then.
I mean, I'm so grateful for Liquid Zoo being across the street from me.
Oh
Like
well,
I went there
now
on
strangers on the
Sunday.
internet know where you live. So you're gonna get murdered.
That's fine. I love Liquid Zoo. I was there on Sunday and it was actually a really nice vibe this past Sunday. Like I had a great time and I felt comfortable. I was like
Uh,
riffing, came up with new stuff. It was a nice time. Okay, I wanna ask you some flashcard questions based on a TV show. This is like the gimmick part of the podcast.
of
So
course,
I
this is what the
ask
fans have
you,
been waiting for.
yeah, yeah, this is
They're
what they
like, this is
listen.
great. When do we get to the flashcards, Grace? Come on.
When are they gonna talk about Korean dramas? For fuck's sake! Yeah, yeah. It's
Actually,
always like this.
I would talk to you about Korean dramas because I know very little about. I haven't watched Squid Games, uh, and if that's my entry point to Korean TV, then
I
You know,
think you would like Squid Game. I
I'm
think
sure
you
I
would
would
like
love
Squid
it,
Game.
but I just haven't watched it
Yeah.
yet. So that's like I know
Yeah.
nothing about Korean television.
Let me know what you think after you watch it. And I did
Okay,
2 episodes on Squid Game for this podcast too. And all
I'm
these
gonna give
fucking
you
journalists.
I'm gonna give
Yeah.
you a viewing assignment also.
Yeah.
I
Okay. Yeah.
watched the last movie I watched was
Yeah.
last week.
Okay.
It was a crazy movie from 1970.
Oh.
It was a Japanese girl biker movie called
Oh.
Stray Cat Rock Delinquent Girl Boss. Uh, very, very Japanese movie title.
I want to
Um,
see this movie so badly.
it's about it's about biker gangs in LA in Tokyo.
Biker
And
gangs.
it's basically it's this production company where they watch these Roger Corman, American International Picture, violent sex biker movies,
Uh
and
huh.
it
Uh
blew
huh.
their minds, and then they decided to make their own. Uh,
Nice.
and so, but the one of the leads is this woman who's a biker, tough as shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
lesbian, like just like
Oh.
dances with all the
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like
Yeah.
they all hang out at a club. I didn't understand like the Japanese cinema back then was so open about I guess you call it queer lifestyle now. When I was
Yeah.
young, we called it alternative lifestyle, but that's
Oh.
very. It's like there's
Yeah.
this comic relief trio, two guys and a woman. They're just constantly making out in a corner of the club. Just
Yeah.
fucking absolutely great. Very violent. Like there's a
It sounds very punk rock, but it's like 70s. And
extremely well. Punk rock was the '70s, right?
yeah. Yeah.
There's a rock band. Woman, like
Yeah.
sometimes just steps on stage and starts singing lead with the band.
Oh,
Uh,
that's amazing.
it's fucking crazy.
This sounds like a movie that was made for me. I like this assignment.
I'm telling you. And so
I'm gonna get into it. Yeah.
I bought this. There's a Blu-ray series from Arrow, but
Okay.
it's up on YouTube.
Okay.
But you can find it streaming on Amazon Prime. I think it's on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
It's a much better print because it's the Arrow print. But
Yeah.
anyway, and it's very very
Thank
low
you.
budget. So sometimes
Yeah.
it feels like you're watching a documentary.
Mm.
Anyway,
Got the grittiness.
I just had the
Yeah.
vibe that this might be a movie that would appeal to you.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding? This sounds like exactly the kind of thing I'd want to see.
Yeah,
Thank
huge
you.
hit. Yeah, Delinquent Girl
I
Boss.
Delinquent Girl Boss. I love that. I love the title too. Fuck. Stray Cat Delinquent.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I wrote it down. I will watch it. Okay, I'm going to ask you some flashcard questions based on a show called The King's Affection, which the series just ended this week. So
Okay.
you can all see the whole thing. The finale is from this week. It is a 20-episode miniseries. It's based on the Joseon Dynasty period, so it's a period piece, but it's
Hmm.
not based on any real actual lived kings or queens. This is all just made up. So
This
it's like a
Chinese?
hybrid. No, this is Korean. This is a Korean
Korean.
drama.
Okay. Okay.
Everything here is Korean drama,
Okay.
and it is about a woman who is passing as a king. That's what it's about.
Okay.
Okay, so let me ask you some questions based on scenes from the show, and you would just answer what you would do if you were in this situation. Okay. So
Okay.
let's say you're the queen of Korea. All
Mm-hmm.
right. You just gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The
Mm-hmm.
doctor, the queen dowager, your father, and the king all say that the girl needs to be killed because twins are a bad omen.
Hmm.
And they have a son that can be the crown prince. So they say we have to kill the girl. What do you do?
I'm gonna make a guess about how this story went.
Okay.
She gave secretly. She said she killed. She said she killed the baby. Right. She tells everyone she
Yeah.
killed the baby, but she gives it up
Yeah.
for adoption, and
Yeah.
it's raised as a commoner, and then
Yeah.
it one day comes back to take the throne. And I'm guessing that this is the girl that ends up masquerading as the king.
Yes. It is.
Okay.
Yeah. But what would you do if you were this mother, the mother of these twins?
I would do what she did. I would say I killed the baby, and I
Okay.
mean that's a story that goes back to Moses. No, it is.
It is. Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
that's
You're right.
like
Yeah.
it's like literally the oldest
Yeah.
story on earth.
Mm. It's biblical.
It is biblical.
Mm. Okay. Let's say now you're the orphan girl. You're that
Oh,
that
okay.
that commoner girl. Your name is Tammy, and you're 12 years old,
Uh huh.
and you're a commoner,
Right.
and you just started your job at the palace as one of these palace girls, like working in the kitchen or whatever. And then one afternoon, you meet the crown prince, and guess what? He looks exactly like you. What do you
And
do?
nobody's ever noticed this before.
No, no.
This is just something where it's like we all work with the prince day after day, and
There are
suddenly here's a
hundreds of
woman.
there are hundreds of people at the palace, so like a lot of
Okay.
people's faces go overlooked. But yeah, like
Okay.
you see the crown prince, and he looks exactly like you. What do you do?
Uh, I'm gonna guess first I do a zoom in with the camera with a big musical sting, uh, and then a cut back to me looking surprised, but like trying to hide it. That's my guess.
Uh
Um,
huh.
Honestly, me being me, I'd probably keep my mouth shut about it. Uh,
Oh
'cause- but
yeah.
I guess like I would start asking around and like just telling people like in my life like what the fuck, I look exactly like the prince. What's going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah.
I'd be a little worried about because the other thing is like there is a thing with royalty called bastard children, and I'd be worried a little bit about making waves with the king because like you don't want to embarrass royalty. You don't want to embarrass
Mm,
someone who's the literal power of life or death over you and everyone you
yep.
love. But yeah, I'd
Yep.
probably start looking into it. Is what I would do.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's say you're Tommy again. You're the same chick.
I'd be like,
The
"Mom,
crown.
what the fuck?" I would. I'd be like, did you know the king? Like, what's going on?"
Yeah. If you are indeed my mom,
Yeah.
if that is indeed your identity, yeah, yeah, yeah. You start questioning everything. Okay. Let's say you're Tommy again. You're still the same girl. The crown prince says he needs to leave the palace to go see his teacher who is about to get beheaded because he was arrested for treason.
Hmm.
And he's not allowed to leave the palace. So he asks you to switch outfits with him. So he's asking you to put on his robe and sit in his chair while he wears your dress and leaves the palace to go and see his teacher for the last time.
Hmm.
You do this. You do this thing, but the the prince who's dressed like you, like the chick, he gets shot with an arrow and is killed by a man hired by your maternal grandfather, the very man who said that no twins should be allowed to be born and that the girl needs to be killed. Um, yeah. What do you do?
That's very interesting. Did they kill him because he's a twin? Like they found out he's
No,
like a
they thought he was the girl. They thought he was the
so they knew the girl was still alive.
yeah. Somebody caught her face, caught wind of it, and they were like, "Uh oh, she's
Oh
actually not
man,
dead." Yeah, yeah.
I guess I'd fucking have to live as the king, right? I mean,
Mm.
like the your options are to flee or to make the best of it.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Okay.
I'd rather live as a king than a refugee. I'll tell you that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you're Tommy. You are the
Ah,
crown prince, okay? You're the crown prince. Like you're the queen right before she passed away, your mother said to you, like you need to pretend to be the prince. Like that's your fucking identity now. Hide the
so
fact that
the
you're a woman
so the
forever.
queen knew.
The queen found out eventually. The queen
Okay.
found out. Yeah, yeah,
Well, she
yeah.
walked in the ladies' room or something.
She just noticed that her son was no longer like he was different. There was something off about him. So she
A
started
mom
asking
would know.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, a mother would know. Um, and the queen said right before she passed away of illness, she said, "You gotta, stay alive and hide your identity and pretend like you're the crown prince. Okay, so you're an adult now. Like, time has passed. You're an adult now. You're still crown prince, but your father dies. The king dies. So you're now officially the king.
Mhm.
And you're married to the queen. Like, they found a nice, wholesome woman and married her to you. So she's your wife. And there's this thing called a hapbang, which is where, like, the king lives in his side of the palace and the queen lives in her side of the palace. But they do this thing called a hapbang, which is where the king and queen meet up at another palace together to spend the night together in order to produce an heir, to basically fuck, to get down, okay? And
So they have a conjugal trailer.
basically, yeah, but it's a fucking palace. Like,
Right.
it's a nice fucking thing. So you gotta go and be with your queen wife and provide this service.
Mhm.
You got this pressure. What do you do?
Well, you can't kill her. Um, I guess you pretend to be impotent. That's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
Uh, you service her orally, I guess.
Oh my god. So you
As
do
all
have sex with her, but
as
just not with
as
your...
all us men do, we service our queens orally. Um,
Gross. Yeah.
really? I feel bad for you
Yeah.
then. You might be dating the wrong fellas.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, I honestly, that's a tricky one, right? Because
I
like,
know. Yeah. Yeah. But that's
you
what she's
pretend.
confronted with. Yeah.
If I were her, I'd pretend to be sick.
Uh, every night, be like, "Sorry, babe. I'm not feeling so well today."
Sorry, I got to go out of the country to wage a 13-year war.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does she do?
Oh, she says, she's so cold. She's like, she tells the servants to bring in another set of blankets. And she's
Uh-huh.
like, "I'm gonna sleep here and you're gonna sleep there.
Wow.
And we are not gonna touch each other. And
Wow.
that's just how it's gonna be. And you're gonna keep your mouth shut about it." It's like really, really cold.
That's
Yeah,
fucking
yeah,
gangster.
yeah. Yeah, this bitch is baller ass. Like, she is fucking balls to the wall gangster. Okay. Next question. Let's say you are this son of a nobleman named Chi-un. Okay, you're
Okay.
like an aristocrat. You're kind of up there in the ranks, but you're not part of royalty. Your father works for the king's maternal grandfather, the one that's all like power hungry and crazy and wants to kill people and shit. And you're you're the king's tutor. So you go and like read books with them and you like teach him stuff, philosophize. You're basically his professor, okay?
And I'm gonna
And the
guess
two of
I'm
you,
falling in love with the king, and it's very
yeah,
confusing. Very very
yeah.
confusing.
You're like attracted to the king,
Right.
and you're like,
Right.
I'm a man and he's a man. Like, what's with
Right.
this? Like, what do you do with all your feelings?
And this is a time before that was maybe legal. Um, I guess I guess I live into my old age with those feelings, and
Wow,
yearn quietly for the king. And
really?
then one day I just let my passions loose, and it turns out the king feels the same way about me. And then
But you're
luckily,
there.
the king is a woman, so it's not against it's not against God's plan. Uh,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
now, what
It's all
if?
kosher.
Here's the thing about them being identical twins like that
Yeah.
is, what if the story had gone differently and the this fucking tutor's in love with the actual king
The real
and
one,
and
the actual
confesses
man
his
one.
yeah and confesses his love to him one day.
That would have been a better show. I
That would be more.
totally, yeah,
That would be a very interesting story to me.
yeah. But you know what's actually this show? The reason why I love this show is because, like, Tami, this woman playing the king, right? Like, her
Uh-huh.
queen situation, like, that queen is like in love with the king. Even after the king says, like, I'm actually, like, she like takes off her top at one point, goes, "This is the reason why I couldn't I couldn't sleep with you every night." Like, there's like a scene like that and like shows her like her cleavage, and the
Uh,
queen is like, you know, but the queen still loves the lady king. Like
Right.
there's this very intense like lesbian attraction coming from the queen. And even with the Chiun guy, even though he's like in love with the king and is like confused, like he has like there's like no holds barred. He like fully smooches the king, like believing he's a
Wow.
man. Like this is like a very like trans queer kind of show. I loved the whole like flexibility and the gender swapping and it was like queer in all directions, and that's why I
Right.
love this show because it was like innovative in that way. So yeah, it was an intense ride. Okay. Yeah. And I guess yeah, there are some predictable factors here, you know. And they're kind of time old gimmicks too. You see them in like cinema a lot, right? Old
Well, I
Hollywood
mean,
films.
you know what they wrote in the Bible, which is there's nothing new under the sun.
Mm.
And that was in the Bible, which was written 6,000 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
2,000 years, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, who cares? It doesn't matter.
1,000 years, whatever, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although Ecclesiastes, I
400 years
think,
ago.
well, no, Ecclesiastes dates back to like 5 or 6,000 years ago.
Is that your
But
favorite book in the Bible?
it's a beautiful book.
Very poetic. Yeah.
It is. I took when I was in college. I took a literature of the Bible class, and
Oh.
just studying the Bible is. And I grew up in basically a Japanese Buddhist cult. So I'd never read the Bible before then. It was like very
You're Irish. You
well
you
Irish.
didn't grow up reading Irish Catholic kind of text or none of that? No
My
Irish
mom's
Catholic?
Jewish,
Ah.
and so they met in the 70s in
Okay.
this
Hippies.
Buddhist.
All right.
Yeah, they weren't hippies. They
Yeah.
just it was the 70s. People joined cults a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it was so it was my first time ever being exposed to the Bible really in a serious way, other
Fascinating.
than through pop culture. And
Yeah.
so I was surprised. Book of Solomon's dirty. Like it's just a dirty poem. It's a long sex
Mm.
poem.
Yeah. Yeah. Solomon was a sex fiend. Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
He liked to dip his wick.
Gross. It's disgusting. He liked to dip his wick, and he liked to like propose insane
Yeah.
things, like let's cut up this baby, and maybe you
Yeah.
could have the one half and the other half. Yeah, yeah. He was a wild guy,
Solomon liked to get his dick wet.
and that's what made him so wise.
It
Yeah,
did.
yeah. Every time he dipped his wick, he was
Yeah.
getting more wisdom. Yeah, it was actually
But
the power of the lady's pussy juice that was giving him the wisdom.
I
Every
mean,
time he did it. Yeah,
think about it. You look at the Bible, there's one character who's
yeah.
renowned for his wisdom,
Uh
and it's
huh.
the same guy who just openly liked to get laid and like wasn't ashamed of it, just like talked about it like most people do.
Yeah, yeah. That's true.
But yeah, especially that generation of Irish Americans are very, it's a very tough, very like, very tough guy mentality, and it's hard for me to relate to. I mean,
Very
I, I,
macho. Yeah, yeah.
I quit drinking when I was living in Queens, and I went to a lot of like meetings
Mm-hmm.
of a program of sobriety that I belonged to with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of older Irish men in.
Mm.
But I mean, I'm talking about like 60s and 70s, like like
Yeah,
elderly.
yeah, yeah,
And I remember once I had to talk to a group about my story, my journey,
yeah, yeah.
and as you do,
Uh-huh.
and I just shared about like how I was feeling at the time. Like I was in a very like weird, like emotional space, and I was talking about it, and just kind of like listen to these old Irish guys like kind of grappling with opening up emotionally in this
Oh,
meeting, which is something they didn't normally do. And this lady
right.
came up to me afterwards. She's like, a lot of these old guys like to pretend they don't have emotions, but they do. And I was like, yeah, we just all had an hour together, like of talking.
Yeah, we gotta let people feel. We gotta let men feel. Even if they're 80, 70 fucking years old, if they are able to feel a little bit, like I think that's important. That's like we're letting humanity reintegrate back into their subconscious.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also a lot of like, it's interesting about that generation is there's a lot of just trauma response involved too, because like people now, baby boomers who are 70s or 80s, they were raised by a generation that had just come back from war.
Yeah.
And it was a generation of untreated veterans with serious
Mm-hmm.
issues who felt uncomfortable discussing it with anyone other than other veterans. So
Yeah.
it's like they would
Yeah.
go to the VFW hall once a week, get drunk, and like talk about their
Yeah.
experiences, but then have to fucking go back to their families and like
Yeah.
try to live a normal life and have a job and a career and all that.
Yeah.
And those Irish guys, I mean, I think it's easy to forget that the Troubles didn't end until the 90s, right?
Mm. Mm.
And there was a lot of stories I would hear in those rooms about like just I was in Belfast with my brother and
Yeah.
we left a pub and a sniper shot him dead. Like shit like that. And it's just like, growing up either first generation coming from that environment where it's just you're under a lot of pressure all the time. Like you
Mm-hmm.
never know, might be in a Dublin marketplace and a bomb might go off. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
never fucking know.
Right.
Or growing up with family that went through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the McEneaney's when they came over from Ireland. they the stories I heard about the generation that lived in Boston, kind of off the
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah.
Like they all just basically lived in a house together till they all died.
Uh,
Like you know, like very like weird and not what we consider in America healthy family behavior.
a lot of dysfunction.
A lot of dysfunction, and the same with the Jewish family because they all came like basically they fled the Cossacks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I found out recently, my sister did a whole genealogy deep dive, and there's like a chunk of our family that were Choctaw, and they had to walk the Trail of Tears because
Wow.
this British family like married into them, and it was a whole fucking story.
So you're like a web of intergenerational trauma.
And
Like,
basically nobody wanted us. Like we're just fucking like constantly fleeing in terror. Um,
yeah.
uh, but yeah, I mean it's like whatever. But I mean we all come from that fucking background one way or another.
We do. We
Uh,
do. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like nobody. So anyway, there's
Mm.
there's a lot of that too, a lot of like suppressing emotion because it's just like fucking not growing up in an environment that's healthy,
That even allowed for that.
that even allowed for it.
Right. That would even
My
hear it out, right? Like, when you're looking at a mother who's like, working class and trying to make ends meet with a shitty father who's toxic and drunk all the time,
hmm
try going to that mother and complaining about a school bully. Try, just try. Just go ahead. Go ahead and
but
try. See if she'll
but
hear you out, you know?
but when I was a kid, we thought Vietnam vets and their PTSD was funny because like we just knew a ton of them. They're just like they were members of the community, and it's like you'd hear about a guy who fucking
Right.
we heard, there was a guy who married an Asian lady, and then he
Oh,
would just
God.
wake up in the middle of the night with night terrors and start hitting her, and it's
Oh,
just
my
like
fucking God.
it's like what else can you do but laugh? Because if you
Yeah.
don't laugh,
Yeah.
you're gonna go crazy.
Yeah, yeah, because it's so weird. It's so
Yeah,
bizarre that it's like the nervous response laughter, the I don't know what the fuck laughter, right? And this is another big part of my dissertation research, which is like I kind of equate laughing with crying.
hmm
It's like the same orifices of your face sort of open up and the same kind
hmm
of brain chemistry is lit up when you're laughing and or crying, which is that they're a tension release. It's a release response of tension. And yeah, it's like in a sense that all that laughing you guys did was technically crying.
yeah,
Technically sobbing. Yeah.
right. Especially when you're a kid, you don't know what the fuck's going on. But
Yeah.
this is a country that loves to send people off to war and then fucking give them the
and then not
Heisman
deal
as soon as they come back.
and then not deal with it and then not deal
Yeah.
with it. Like we in like looking at the future, we got to deal with the Middle East and
Mm-hmm.
all that shit that's going to come out of that. Like not only our veterans, but also people who are Middle Eastern American,
Mm-hmm.
and then the people who are in the Middle East currently and what they're dealing with, the aftermath of all of this, right? Like all of that. That's like the next thing that we're going to be dealing. I mean, we're dealing with it as we speak, but yeah. Yeah, that's
I
something
mean,
we're all going to come to terms with. We got to come to terms with that.
Grace,
Yeah.
this is the best first date I've been on in a long time. So
This is fun.
don't be sorry.
Thanks for your time, Liam. This is great.
Next time I'll take you to a podcast I like. No, this is great. Thank you.